Welcome to another Quantum Conversation, brought to you by AcousticHealth.com. I'm Loren Gailey, and I invite you to sit back as we enter the quantum realm, that space of the greater part of you. It is your connection to infinite possibilities, infinite potential, and infinite mastery. And we are talking with Christopher Timms, my next guest today, about crystals and their effect on planetary and personal ascension. I want you to welcome this very special guest who is the founder of the Order of the Blue Star, who has been teaching eternal teachings since 1988. Please welcome Christopher Timms to Healing Conversation. Hello, Chris. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here with you, Lori.
Oh, yes. We are so looking forward to this call. We are going to continue our discussion on the crystal skulls. We only touched briefly on this last week with Judy Callie on Max and the crystal skull, but you have had personal experience with the Mitchell-Hedges Crystal Skull. So let's start there and have you share your own story of awakening, which it seems like it was pretty much most of your life, and then this amazing experience with the Mitchell-Hedges Crystal Skull.
Great. I'd love to. The experience of my journey, as I look back at it now, is just a wonderful orchestration of events. I came in this life to a very Leave It to Beaver kind of household up north in Wilmington, Delaware, and in this nice stable home environment, I started playing the violin when I was 6, the drums when I was 10. My mother really valued an education, so she made sure that even though we had to barter and trade, my father got us into private school, and my 2 younger sisters and I had the benefit of an amazing education. And it was with that education and the beginning of music when I was a little boy. I started playing the violin when I was 6, the drums when I was 10, and I played professionally on and off throughout my life. These ingredients propelled me into a curiosity that I kept wide open. I think it was the right brain nature of music, creativity, and I became curious about yoga at 13 and martial arts when I was 14, and I just kept on with those interests. And to make a longer story short, the foundations of martial arts, the foundations of music, the foundations of yoga in the fundamental forms really gave me an insight into the world of spiritual experience. And as I began to explore beyond the boundaries of martial arts and yoga, I found that I had a natural affinity to just experience a lot of things. I was already seeing energy pretty much continuously around everything. And I remember thinking as a kid that everybody did that until I realized that other people weren't doing that, and the adults really weren't doing any of that. And I learned, something in me just clicked, and I learned not to really talk about it a whole lot with other people, even kids, as I grew up. But I can most of the time I can see sound, see music coming out of the speakers of my stereo or out of the car or out of musical instruments. When the wind blows through the trees, I can see the energy coming off of that, not just as energy of the trees, but as sound waves. And energy off of people, and not just energy. I would see into people, see beneath their surface, and see their feelings. I didn't know how to interpret all this. I was seeing what they were feeling as though it was another body, and at that time I didn't know it was another body, and I would see memories, like movies playing within people, just at the supermarket or walking down the street. And so as I continued to grow and pursue different teachings, I joined different organizations. And I'm very strongly based in my own sovereignty and my own individuality and in my own experience. And I don't buy a lot of dogma. I don't buy a lot of hierarchical, proprietary stuff. And I basically, Lori, I got thrown out of every organization I tried to join. And really, the reason is because I experience things that most other people just believe in, have faith in, and think that they understand. And once you experience things that other people just kind of think about or consider, you realize that you're in a whole different world, because experiencing things is always transcendent to just believing them or understanding them. And so after getting thrown out of a number of organizations, I just started my own back in 1988. And to show you how perfect life is, I think everybody will like to hear this idea. As I began the Order of the Blue Star, it was just a name that came to me because out of my childhood and throughout my life, I see these blue sparklies out of the corners of my vision. And they're always there. And so I called the organization the Order of the Blue Star. And I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have any idea what to do. I just wanted to talk to people about something that I felt was precious and sacred. And I had no idea what to do. And so I sold a lot of my tools and equipment from my contracting business, and I got a van, fixed it up, and put a bed in the back of it, and got some big Rubbermaid tubs with clothes and stuff, and I just headed out on the road. And within 2 years of me setting out and starting that, from January 8th of 1988, when I started just outside the Edgar Cayce Institute in Virginia Beach, within 2 years, with no business plan, with no idea of really what to do, I was teaching in 18 different cities, from Vancouver to Santa Cruz to Dallas to Miami to everywhere in between. And I had invitations already coming in to go to Australia and go everywhere. And this is really despite anything that I was doing, not because of what I was doing, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just telling people about my life. And here we are today, still doing the same thing.
Oh, well, thank you for standing in your experience and bringing that forward, because that experience, as you mentioned, become our truth. So I have a few more questions based on what you said there. Seeing the energy when you were a kid and learning it's probably best not to talk about this. What did you see and how did you control that? You know, you said you can see music coming out of the speakers or the energy of the wind blowing through the trees. For the layman who cannot see in the way that you see, when you have a car driving across a road and there's snowflakes and the car passes on the road, we snowflakes move according to the wind that was created. So this is something that you're able to see without any extra particulates. You can see, is it like vision? Is it colors?
Yes, it can be colors and shapes. For instance, I can see a bit of your voice coming out of the speakers I have in my monitors here in my office studio. And there's morphing geometric shapes around the tone and timbre of your voice. And they change, the shapes change. The shapes and the colors are layers of metaphor, just like your words are, and the tone of your voice is metaphor for the way that your state of consciousness is expressing itself from this abstract state in which it dwells within us ourselves to a relative state out here in this realm. So whether it's words and rhythm of your speech or your tone of voice, or whether it's the color and texture that I see, these are all, to me, layers of metaphorical impressions, expressions from the state of consciousness, the essence that you are. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so when you see morphing geometric shapes that change, that begs the question of sacred geometry in itself. So I know we're going to talk about crystals, and crystals come in the form of sacred geometry.
That's
right.
But
what is going on with sacred geometry? I guess we could explain it as this is how source energy moves through the dimensions.
Yes, you could. A nice way for people to begin to understand sacred geometry is that, first of all, sacred geometry doesn't have anything to do with numbers. It doesn't have anything to do with golden mean rectangles or Fibonacci spirals or all those things. People think that it does, but sacred geometry has to do with just noticing the inherent harmony that exists in everything from your own DNA to a sunflower, to the lattice of a quartz crystal, the DNA of a quartz crystal, how it spirals, to the spiraling of our entire Milky Way, the galaxy, our galactic home. These are all echoes, again, metaphor for what the ancients called the voice of God. So the voice of God, according to ancient stories, the way they told in parable, the creation story, the voice of the great maker sang upon the still water. Sang upon the still water. So sound, in the beginning there was the word. The word is sound. Out of the word came light. Light is form. So, and then came all the heavens and earth. So sound, light, form, and as you can imagine, a vibration casting itself upon a still pool of water, it's moving, it's morphing, it's shifting, and it's changing. And so sacred geometry, in its very elementary forms, can be confusing to people if they're not introduced to it properly. If they go into it trying to study the numbers and the spirals and the ratios and all that stuff, it becomes, meaningless, boring, and it's an outside-in way of doing it. When you realize that your bones, your blood, your DNA, and everything in the natural world around you is echoing this voice of God, this presence of the universe, and you just begin to look with that childlike sense to notice it everywhere, that's when you begin to catch the essence of it all. And then later down the road, we cover what sacred geometry in its numerical and its mathematical ideas are, just gently, not as a entry point, but as a secondary or tertiary aspect to really grasping what it's all about. So does that speak to your question a little bit?
It does, and it's a fascinating topic, and so thank you for that, because when we think of the sacred geometry and the voice of God that it is and how energy moves, those numbers and the phi ratio that comes out of it is just our minds trying to wrap ourselves around it. So beautiful. Yes. I love that.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about crystals here soon, but I do have a quick question on the Order of the Blue Star. Isn't it fascinating that it's blue sparkles that you saw out of the corner of your eye? What were you intuiting this was about? Was it a comforting feeling? Tell us more about how you became so close to that it was your guide?
I remember being a little boy, and I remember it really clearly. I mean, I was young enough that I was wearing my footy pajamas, okay? And it was around Christmas time, and I remember my dad taking a big blue star and putting it on top of the Christmas tree. And I was just stunned. And I was trying to explain to him that I see many of those, because it was the closest thing that I had ever seen as a little kid to these blue sparkles. They look like Sylvania blue dots when someone would take your picture with one of those old flash cameras that you'd see out of your vision. They would just flash and pulse. And as I grew older, these sparklies then began to coalesce into each other and become one big pool of blue-white light, much like a transporter beam from Star Trek. And but they brought me curiosity. They brought me a sense of well-being and happiness and optimism and just joy all the time. Nothing but those types of ideas or feelings, optimism, joy. Yeah. So that's
okay.
Okay.
So that's beautiful. Was there a time when you recognized them from off planet or contemplated what they were?
Yes. As I began to study esoteric traditions from around the world, I found that virtually everybody talks about this blue presence. Yuktananda and Muktananda and Yogananda talk about it as the blue pearl. And you find different other traditions talking about it as the blue ray, the blue man. The Hopi speak about the return of the blue star as heralding in the new world for man. And that's another great misconception. Many of the new thought people and researchers keep trying to tell you that they're looking for a sign in the skies, the return of the blue star being a comet, with a blue tail or this celestial event, when the Hopi elders tell you that it's not that at all. The return of the blue star is not an event outwardly. It's the return of a way of life. It's the return to an original teaching, an original way of existence that's in harmony with this presence, that has for its metaphorical archetype or symbol here in our realm this blue star, this blue pearl, blue man, blue ray, blue presence. In Egypt, our mystery school was known as the House of the Blue Lotus, Dendara. Dendara was our temple. And you can see the beautiful blue lotuses down in the level at Dendara below ground in the areas where they don't really like you to go. And there are amazing full-color pictographs on the walls showing you the blue lotus and telling you of the creation of the universe in that language of pictures. So when it came time for me to begin my own organization, I had no idea what to do. I wasn't going to call it the Christopher Tim Show, so I just kind of reflected on that for myself. I thought, well, of course, and it had to be called the Order of the Blue Star. And
beautiful.
There we are.
And I love that it is a return to a way of life that is in harmony with this blue presence. This way of life, yes, this is what we're moving back to. Some call it the rise of Lemuria. Others say it is the return of this blue star. And so what is that return that we're moving? We are in New Earth, and we are literally creating it while we're watching the old paradigm fall away. And also this does involve disclosure as well, which we're watching unfold. But you've got things to say about disclosure, and let's also talk about why, and we'll move into how we really should be creating, well, I don't want to should on ourselves, but this, how we are creating new Earth here in every moment.
So what would you like me to tackle first?
I know that was a big loaded question, wasn't it? So the teaching of
4 parts in here, yeah.
So first, let's go to the disclosure, because that is so on the top of everyone's minds. We are learning about things that are literally why disclosure comes in the form that it is, where we as individuals can expand our consciousness to become aware of this going on. And when we learn that here we are with secret space programs that our government and even beyond our government are operating, the most fascinating aspect is that it validates what sages and teachers have taught about this energy that you saw as a child and how we can work with this energy. So your input on disclosure and how we can best use this information to bring forth new Earth.
Yes. Well, an important lesson to learn from this idea of looking for disclosure is comes out of the Greek mythologies, where the gods are discussing with each other, where will we hide the presence of God, the creative force? And the gods speak to each other and kind of argue, and they say, well, we'll hide it up way out in space, way out in the stars. No, man will develop ways of looking way out into the stars. All right, well then we'll put this secret, this presence at the depths of the ocean and hide it there. No, he'll develop ways of going to the ocean and seeing everything that's there. We'll put it into the earth, deep into the earth. No, he'll look way in the earth. Well, where will we put this so that man will never discover that he is God, that man will never discover? We have to keep this. Oh, I know. They finally decided that they would hide the presence of God deep within our own hearts, because they were convinced that we would almost never look there. And that's really just epidemic. Look around. Look at the world that you live in now. Looking to all the outside sources to give you the information, to give you the framework through which you can experience your own freedom, your own creative magnificence, when you have that license within yourself. And disclosure is a really good example of that, in that people have been looking and speaking. Many of the well-known authors and speakers are always talking about, next month we're going to have full government disclosure. Next month we're going to have full government disclosure. Next month this is going to happen, and the Dragon family is going to this, and this group is going to do that, and the Illuminati is going to do that. All right. And then there's going to be ETs on the front steps of the White House, with the president, and this is what my sources tell me, and all of this stuff. And as you all know, this doesn't happen week after week, month after month, year after year. And to me, that's all part of the purposeful deception. That's a setup. Don't fall for any of that stuff. That's the boy who cried wolf, over and over and over again. When are you going to realize that the wolf isn't really there? And what's happening here is that disclosure has already happened, and disclosure is happening now. Now, one of my fun things to do is I enjoy science fiction. I've enjoyed Star Trek and all of these different types of shows, Stargate and all of this stuff throughout the years. And I study the language, and I look at the way the set is set up, in the languaging, as I said, in structures, scripting, and everything, how the topics that are addressed. And the prophets of our age, everybody, the prophets of our age are people like Walt Disney, teaching you about spirituality through the parables of his amazing stories that many of us grew up with. And people like Gene Roddenberry that wrote Star Trek. I was just watching some of the earlier series of The Next Generation with Captain Picard and all those characters. And, I mean, he's holding a smartphone in his hand. He's holding a smartphone in his hand, you know, Captain Picard is and the other characters. Yeah. And they're doing calculations and they're communicating and they're bringing in apps, you know, to run different types of tests and all this stuff that there was nothing like that for the conventional people. There was nothing like that. That show was out in 1988, 1989. I forget the exact first year it came out. But they had all those things. Oh, that's just Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Well, in Star Trek, they also had the replicator. The replicator. Well, we have a replicator today. It's out all around the world. 3D printers. And that's just what they're selling. You can buy them at BJ's. You know? They have them there now. You know, and that's just the elementary forms that are for public display. So disclosures happen. Star Wars with Yoda and Luke Skywalker, that's telling you about our true galactic nature. You know, and all the scripts telling you about, like the physician on Star Trek that doesn't use any medications to heal anybody, and that bones heal almost instantly with using light and vibration, and everything is done with frequencies that are imprinted into your body through simple and painless delivery devices. You know, there's disclosure. There's disclosure. I mean, we could do an hour just on that. You know, and but so what I'm saying is, look right around you. Look right around you for disclosure, because it's there. You have to look not directly into what the authority is telling you, because the authority is the old Piscean age technology system of the world. You have to look obliquely into the realms of what's considered to be art, entertainment, music, television, children's stories, the prophets in their work. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and thank you for sharing on that. It's always very interesting, and I hope I don't have too much of an echo here. There are reports of one. Well, then let's move on to crystals and the crystal skulls. When you are sharing about light and vibration and the frequencies, crystals actually are working in our favor. We know they're used in our computers, and there's many listening who work with them, and we even plant them in the earth. So share first on your experience with Mitchell-Hedges Crystal Skull.
Well, it was quite a year for me in 1988, and that's when I started the Order of the Blue Star. And without a plan, without any ideas, I just started traveling to the different psychic fairs and giving lectures, and then someone would hear about me and I'd get a call. I had an 800 number where people could leave me messages because I had no computer, I had no anything, and I had no cell phone. And I got a phone call to go to a town outside of London, a small city called London, Ontario. And as I taught there for my first excursion into Canada, at the end of the weekend of teaching, which was an amazing event for me, my very first teaching in Canada had 130-some people show up. And I was teaching at this beautiful estate, and it was all just set up for me like a red carpet was just unrolling. And It was just the beginning of an amazing journey. So after that wonderful weekend of teachings, I was taken by the man that was coordinating the weekend event to an event. And he said, it's your day off, come on with me, I want to show you something. So I didn't know where he was taking me. And we drove for an hour or more. And I didn't really feel like being in a vehicle, but I was just relaxing and just seeing what was going on. And we eventually showed up in a little town called Kitchener. And there we landed, arrived, got out of the vehicle, and as we walked up the sidewalk, this woman opened the door, an elderly lady, and I thought, my friend David here, the coordinator, he's brought me to meet his grandmother. Okay, this is nice, but I really wanted to do something else today. But I was just going along, and I felt this buzzing all around me, Lori. And when I walked in the door, I felt like there were ants just running all over my body. And I looked to the left, and there on a coffee table, right next to some potpourri, is the crystal skull. And I just didn't know what to think. I looked at this, and I thought, oh my God, that's the skull off that TV show. I mean, I didn't really know anything about the skull from Ancient Mysteries years ago. And so we go in and sit down, and that was 1988. And between 1988 and 1996, I probably had over 100 hours of personal time with Anna Mitchell-Hedges and the Crystal Skull. And making a longer story short, because I share a lot about the details in the teaching, but just so everyone can understand, I didn't know that I had a very special relationship with Anna Mitchell-Hedges, the lady that was the caretaker of this skull. I thought that everybody was allowed to pick up the skull and walk around with it and be alone with it, and she would just go off and do another part of the house and do her thing and leave me there. And I didn't know it was unusual, but it wasn't until years later that I found out that virtually no one was allowed to do anything that I did with the skull, including the crescendo, really, of all these experiences, which is when the skull, over a period of months, kept coming to me as I was traveling around the country, and I customized and built a compound piece of geometry. That the compound means there's a geometry within a geometry, just for the crystal skull, according to exactly how the skull wanted it built. And I showed up at Anna's thinking that it was going to be just an event for her and I and the skull, and she had mentioned it casually to a few people, but I guess the skull in its own presence wanted something more. So this turned into a kind of a Woodstock event, and there were 100 and some people that just showed up, and with music and healing and all this cool stuff going on all day. And then I set up the skull, and we did this event that the skull wanted me to do using geometry and sound in the form of crystal bowls and chanting. So what is the skull? The skull, in case you don't know, you guys don't know, the Anna Mitchell-Hedges skull is really unlike any other crystal skull. Okay? Some of them are modern skulls that have been tooled, and some of them are questionable. They may be real ancient skulls. You know, I've been with Max, and I've been with the Mitchell-Hedges skull. But I know that Hewlett-Packard analyzed the Anna Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull and said that this should not exist. That was the summation of all of their research, using dark cell microscopy, oil immersion, all kinds of things. This should not exist. This should not exist. It has a detachable jawbone, just like you and I do, and it's made of optical grade quartz, which means that you can hold a book on the other side of the skull and look through the skull, and you can still read the book. And I mean, it's astoundingly clear. And
where was it found? It was found by the Mayans
yes.
with her family. Did her family find it?
Yes, her stepfather, and her stepfather was actually, his name was Mitchell-Hedges, and he was actually the character that Indiana Jones was fashioned after. Isn't that great? That's the actual man who was the real Indiana Jones. And he wrote a book that I have here in my library called Danger, My Ally. And when you see his pictures of him going to Belize, and that's where he took Anna for a summer vacation in Belize. Imagine going to Belize in 1933. And they were uncovering and studying Mayan ruins, you know, and the incredible rawness of that whole area, totally undiscovered, totally uncontaminated by Western culture. And Anna actually found the skull herself. Now, this is how the universe works again. She was climbing the side of a Mayan pyramid that was overgrown with all types of vegetation as would encroach upon the temples in South America, unlike Egypt, you know, where it was desert. And as she was climbing on the sides of this Mayan pyramid, she looked into a hole in there, which was a port into the pyramid. And when she looked in, it just happened to be, so, you know, this is the universe, at that particular time of day, she looked and she could see into the pyramid, and she saw that there was something flashing, something sparkling down there. And so there was an access to the pyramid that was already uncovered. So as they went into the pyramid, they find that this sunlight at this time of day, at this time of year, is casting its clear beam into the pyramid, and it's illuminating a well, an artesian well that was still percolating water up in the middle of this temple, this pyramid. And as the light was shining in there, there was something that was actually reflecting the light down inside the well. So after just a few minutes, the light passed in its, you know, apogee across the sky. And as it moved out of direct illumination of the well, they brought in lights, they brought in flashlights, they brought in things, and they had to actually, because the well wasn't big enough for a full-size man to go in, they actually had to lower Anna down. Anna insisted on going down into the water with a rope, and she pulled up this clear thing that she couldn't really identify under the water, but it was the top half of the crystal skull. And I believe a day or so later, upon further exploration of the well, they found the jawbone. Now, at that point, Mitchell-Hedges and Anna brought the skull to the local Mayan tribe, and because it was theirs. And there was just a great celebration. There was just a great excitement, as the Maya have all of these myth stories about the importance of the skulls, particularly the clear quartz skull, this one in particular. And after a number of days of, you know, fires and celebration and stories and chanting and all of this, the Mayan elders gave the crystal skull back to Anna Mitchell-Hedges, not her father, but to Anna, because she found it, and explained to her that she was supposed to take it to the world, that it wasn't supposed to be with them anymore. Wow. They were overjoyed that it had come back, but it meant that the skull needed to be with our world, because the Mayan elders said that it's our time now as a culture, as a species. It's not their time. So then they had to smuggle the skull and other artifacts, that you're not allowed to take artifacts out of the country, but this is the Crocodile Dundee kind of a thing, or the, not Crocodile Dundee, the Indiana Jones kind of character that he was. And so they smuggled the crystal skull and some other artifacts out, and Anna has been caretaker of that skull from 1933 until just a few years ago when she passed away at the age of 100. And I believe she made her last trip back to Belize when she was 96 and visited with the, of course, descendants of those Mayan elders that from that same clan who rendered the stories of the crystal skull. So, I mean, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about this skull. Go ahead.
Yes, and so, well, that is a fascinating story, that here there's this ancient relic that they are so kind and generous to give to the local Mayan tribe, and the tribe celebrates. They understand the clear quartz crystal, and they give it back to Anna for her to take around the world. Did they tell her what the message was, or what is the messages from the crystal skull?
No, they did not. And I believe that was in their infinite wisdom, in that neither her father nor Anna at that young age would be able to really grasp what it was about, because their perceptions would be relative to their understanding. And so they brought it back knowing that it was something more than what it appeared to be. And Anna lived her life very graciously and very kindly, opening her home to people from all over the world to come and visit and to see the skull, to just experience it, and to let the skull share whatever it was, whatever it is about, with everyone to the degree that they're able to experience it.
And so what did you experience?
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Basically, I knew immediately upon seeing the crystal skull that I had a rapport with it. It just made me smile, and I felt a warmth inside me. And I knew it really wasn't from this world. And it wasn't until I listened to the work by a scientist, and I'll remember his name here in a minute, but he was a NASA astrophysicist, genius guy, and he was allowed to study the quartz crystal, and he found that that piece of quartz crystal is unlike anything else on the planet, in that it grew spherically, it grew in all directions, which means that quartz crystal was somehow grown in a zero-gravity environment. Because a quartz crystal in the ground has a lattice, just like your DNA. It has a base, and it grows in one direction, or given the right environment, it grows in two directions, which makes a double-terminated quartz crystal. But this has a three-way continuous axis that's moving and now in 6 directions. And so that makes it impossible for it to be from this world. That means the earth didn't cook that crystal, didn't make that crystal. It came from some other source. So my experiences with the crystal skull are many. And the essence is that upon a visit one day, Anna mentioned to me that the skull really wanted to be with me, which was kind of normal. She would just say, the skull wants to be with you, and she would disappear into the kitchen. She would go make tea and just leave me, have some space. Then she'd bring out tea and, in good British tradition, serve us together. And upon this visit, the skull just felt really different. It felt very still. And I just sat with the skull and I emptied myself. And then I picked the skull up, and as I would normally, and I'm holding it from the bottom and one hand on the top, and I began to open and close the jawbone, much like I would be tuning in a radio station. That's what it sounded like to me and felt like to me when I would open and close the jaw. And I was just doing what I would normally do, being with the skull, and suddenly I hit this point, in my adjustments, opening and closing the jaw. It felt like what you would call a node in acoustics. And I hit this node, and I just held it there. It was a big energy point. And then what I saw with my eyes open, looking at the skull, was the skull literally left its body. And I was still holding the physical skull, but the etheric body of the skull, the exact template of it, but in an energy body, came towards me, facing me, turned away, and then it merged right into my cranium. And within that experience, in that moment, my own vision, no matter how clairvoyant I was at that point, was now just catapulted into another layer of seeing. And from that event, and that was probably 1994, from that event until now, I see through the eyes of the crystal skull as well as my own eyes continuously all day, every day. And the skull doesn't see you or me as a sack of symptoms, Laurie. It doesn't see you as biological stuff. It doesn't see you it doesn't even see you really as a separate being. It sees you as a swarm like a swarm of bees, but the bees are droplets of light, and it's morphing and changing like a geometry with millions of sides and angles. Just this living geometry, this living experience of light. And the experience of the skull is not about information. That's just kind of preschool stuff. The real experience of the skull is a heightened state of perception and the insight that goes with it to realize the nature of reality, the fabric of the universe kind of stuff, staring into the face of God, type of a thing. It's not about the mundane realms of information to do with matter, energy, space, and time. It's about creation and the ongoing kind of effervescence, you could say, kind of continuous, the fountain of creation. And the skulls, the Anna Mitchell-Hedges skull is the hub of the skull wheel. In the prophecies, there are 13 skulls, and that prophecy actually parallels with the Sumerian prophecy and with the Egyptian pyramid, where there are 12 slots in the descending chamber, the ascending and descending chamber, the Great Hall, in the entrance to the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber itself is the 13th slot or chamber. And the Sumerians talk about the talking stones. They were the original crystal skulls. And these talking stones, crystal skulls, were planted in these slots in the pyramid. And the 13th, being the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was planted inside the sarcophagus of the Great Pyramid. And when all the skulls were together in the pyramid became fully what the ancients called activated. It doesn't mean kind of what activation means today in our contemporary language. It It's more of a meaning that it's plugged in, it's connected now to an existing circuit of existence of multiple dimensions and multiple physical parallel universes, all of that stuff. And so the Great Pyramid was a hub and kind of an intergalactic, interdimensional gateway for anyone who's qualified to be able to actually travel. And so that's kind of the beginning of what the skull is about. And gosh, there's just so much. You kind of cut me loose and turn me on to all this to get going, and I could just do another huge, expansive time about that. But why don't you kind of rope me in a little bit and share with me where you'd like to go?
Thank you for that story about these crystal skulls and how they came into existence. And again, it really is the experience that will bring together our truth. So you also now, because of this experience that you had with this crystal skull, you directly transmit that energy onward. It was amazing that you connected with this skull. So what is the importance of the quartz crystal and how it was so perfect? Have you contemplated this?
Quartz crystal, I began working with in that year 1988, not only did I start the teachings, I had really begun to take seriously my interest in quartz crystals, and I went and started traveling to Arkansas and bought truckloads of quartz crystal, literally pickup truckloads of quartz crystals. And while I was on a trip to Arkansas getting quartz, to make another story very short that I tell in the teachings, I became caretakers of two stones, ancient quartz crystals that were mined in the same year that Anna Mitchell-Hedges found the crystal skull, 1933. These crystals are called Mr. Light and Mr. Sound. Mr. Light is a double terminated quartz crystal that weighs 110 pounds. And Mr. Sound is a single terminated crystal that weighs 90 pounds. And these crystals sat from 1933 to 1988 on the outside, on either side of this gentleman's front door in Mount Ida, Arkansas, just outside of Hot Springs. And they were waiting for me, obviously. And I wasn't even born yet. And then when I came upon them, because of a series of events, they came with me. And these big crystals I would bring to Canada with me to go visit with Anna and the crystal skull. And so these skulls, or the skull and the big crystals, are entangled. They're quantum entangled together completely. The skull completely offloaded all of its information, all of its experiences, not really information, it's the abstractions of configurations of sound and light into Mr. Light and Mr. Sound. So having these crystals, I really began to study seriously what quartz crystals were all about. I had a lot of intuition. I had read and studied some things, but you realize that quartz is called the master stone by a number of different indigenous people because it's completely clear. And being clear, it has within it the qualities of all the different gemstones. And it's like a prism. Depending upon how you adjust it, you can adjust the frequency output of the crystal. And you can adjust it by, let's say, taking a piece of quartz and laying it there on your desk, and then take a ruby or a piece of tourmaline. And as you take that piece of ruby and you put the ruby on top of the quartz, now the quartz will amplify the frequency of the ruby. So now you have a ruby the size of your fist, with the energy of that. So the waveform has been amplified clearly without a distortion. So as far as healing and personal exploration and consciousness, it has a great aptitude. And this is why quartz has been the main ingredient in all of the different ancient sites all around the world, whether it's in the granite blocks, the feldspar, the other types of stone that they use in different parts of the world. These are all very high concentration quartz because of the energetic qualities that quartz has. And it's not just that it's an amplifier. Let me say this one more thing about quartz, and that really helps people understand. A quartz crystal, unlike any other being that I've ever met, is exactly the same at all the different lower stages of consciousness. For instance, Lori, you and I are physical beings. When we jump up one octave, now we're in what I call the astral plane. Our astral body looks different than the physical body. It resembles you and I, but you're sparkly. You're filled with light. We appear to be more vital, more alive, younger looking, things like that. And then as you get up to the causal, the change is even more dramatic. The mental and the etheric levels. Now, different people may know these planes of consciousness by different names. It doesn't matter. There are these different primary stages of consciousness. And as we ascend in consciousness, we become more androgynous, less segregated from our environment, more diffused, until when we reach the higher states of consciousness at the spiritual eye and the crown, then at the crown we are part of the ocean, oneness, just as living awareness with no real sentient awareness at all. It's more of just an inclusiveness. And the quartz crystal is not like that. Quartz crystal stays exactly the same. When I look at a crystal in the physical, and then I look at it in the astral, and the causal, and the mental, and in the etheric planes, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. And this is a huge factor. This means that when you learn how to merge with the crystal, when you learn how to let go of yourself and be in the dynamic that the crystal offers you, it's an elevator that it can lift you clearly. Even with all of our baggage that we carry around with us, you just have to do the best you can to let go, and the crystal can carry you effortlessly into this high amplified state. Quartz crystal is also called the shaman stone by a number of different indigenous tribes and the Mayan elders in Guatemala because of this ability to travel with quartz so clearly into these other realms effortlessly. So it makes it invaluable in our spiritual journey, because as we elevate in our consciousness, we have insight into everything in our lives. We have a different point of perception. Our values adjust. Our direction, the vector of our lives adjusts. Everything falls into greater compliance and harmony with this experience of transcendence through the skull and through the use of crystals. Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. And so how do we learn to merge with a crystal? I know you've got a full course that goes deep into the crystal kingdom and how we can work with them. But I think we'd like to work with our crystals. And what happens if our crystals break on us, disappear? And what about giving crystals back to the earth?
Well, the indigenous people tell you that, and this is the way they translate their language into English language. They say that everything is a person. They look at they don't see fire like at a campfire or a fire pit. They see fire people. They don't see a stream with water flowing. They see water people. So they don't see crystals, they see rock people. Okay? So, what this means is that you're asking really how do we get out of the way? How do we use quartz? Right? Is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And merging with that crystal.
I'm trying to funnel my answer down into something that simply, if you just pick up a quartz crystal and hold it in your hand, then it begins to amplify you. It begins to reveal you to you. And that's just a natural quality of its own ascending nature. It's trying to elevate you like a rocket trying to blast off. And that's very helpful when we're willing to be honest and willing to let go of things that begin to spin around turbulently within ourselves. And crystals, being people, they'll talk to you. They'll tell you when it's time for you to give them to somebody else, when it's time for you to put them into the earth and just leave them alone, when it's time to clear them, to charge them, and to store them in a dark environment, not being on display, not being out in the open. And because crystals are people too. So as you become sensitive, then just like the plants talk to you and the animals talk to you and other people talk to you, the crystals talk to you. So this is an important stage in the natural relationship we have to our environment. This is the path of the shaman and the mystic, is to realize that all of life is speaking to us. Every part of life is speaking to us. We just have to learn how to listen, because listening comes from our hearts. Hearing just comes from our ears. Does that make sense?
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful words. Every part of life is listening, or every part of life is speaking to you. So now, this could be controversial when we think about singing bowls, quartz crystal singing bowls. If we have crystals that are beings, and quartz crystal bowls, the way that they're made, they're ground down and then heated up to a magnificent temperature and reformed to build a beautiful singing bowl. What's happening there? Does the consciousness follow the bowl, the crystal?
Well, what happens, so that everybody understands, the crystals that are used to make quartz crystal bowls are crystals that have already been broken or fractured in the natural propagation, the natural growth within the earth as the earth moves, or some type of harmonic within the earth shifts them a bit and they actually crack and break. They don't take intact crystals and use them to make quartz. But as they choose a batch of quartz that they'll use to make crystal bowls, they melt it down to about 3,300 degrees Fahrenheit, and they cast it into a shape of the crystal bowl, and then they use a diamond lathe, and they cut it down, grinding it on the top of the bowl, and as you relieve mass from the bowl, which is grinding it down, the frequency increases. So they bring the frequency up until it digitally matches the frequency that they want the bowl to render. And that's how the bowls are made. So now the spirit of the quartz, you could say, the presence, the personality, however you would talk to it, however you would describe it, rather. Many times I've found that the spirit of the crystal bowl is the spirit of a whole family of quartz crystals that still had enough of their presence involved, even after their fracture, even after the melting and the reforming and all that goes on, that they're still involved. So there was like a whole clan or family involved in this crystal bowl. And I have a whole octave of the crystal bowls, that I use in different work, and each of them has their own personality. And over the years of having these bowls, the personalities that were once many people within each bowl, many voices, seem to have come together, and there's more of a unified presence. So does that help speak to that a little bit?
Yes, it does, because I know that was a question that came up for some, and it's important to understand this. It's beautiful. So thank you for sharing on that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you have a whole teaching, a whole program on working with crystals and the crystal kingdom, and also this includes a personal time with you in a session. Before we take some questions, can you share more on your special offer that allows people to work with these crystals in such a beautiful way?
Sure. I love teaching the crystal kingdom, and crystals for personal and planetary transformation really is a good subtitle, and how to evoke really the magic and the presence of quartz in your day-to-day life. And my background with quartz, my experimentation, my years of working with quartz really is shared with everybody. And this is a video presentation, and there's an extensive amount of material about how to properly clear quartz crystals. And there's several different ways, but unless you do it properly, then you're not going to get it right. And clearing them is like clearing extraneous static out of an electrical circuit. And so you have to clean it. You have to clean the crystal. And then there's ways to charge a crystal. Different ways. Morning sunlight, afternoon sunlight, full moon light. These are all very different dynamics, and to learn how to use them, have sets of crystals that are charged with specific types of energy for specific types of things. It's fun. It's really great because you can feel the difference between full moon and afternoon or morning crystals. And then, of course, we talk about quartz crystals as a interdimensional hub connecting us with planetary and galactic grid systems. I go through a little bit of sacred geometry, but just acquainting everybody, like what we did earlier in our conversation, just in more depth. No math, just in depth. And I also talk about how we use Bach flower remedies, how we use essential oils, how we use other gems in conjunction with quartz, how we can use tuning forks with quartz crystals, to polarize them to specific frequency outputs for periods of time. All types of really fun things. And this is all, anything that I share with you in this workshop is all part of a scientific yet metaphysical approach to doing things. In my experience, the metaphysical world, when it's clearly rendered, is a reflection of our physics, of our universe, quantum physics particularly. And quartz is a great example of that. So that's the teaching. And now you also have a Q&A. And the Q&A is, there are two Q&As in this workshop, before and then after. Or not before and after, I'm sorry, at lunchtime and then at the end. And then the Q&As are included because I think it's great for everyone to hear what people are thinking, what they're asking about. And the Q&As were fantastic in this group. I mean, one is 80 minutes long. solid questions and answers from people from different parts of the world that were on this lecture. And that's the lunchtime one. The one after the class was 52 minutes long. So that's just great extra material. And then for your group, or for people that want to be a part of this and explore this kingdom, then we're going to do a live Q&A just for your group. All right? And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that Q&A will be in a couple weeks. It'll be December 15th. That's on a Tuesday at 7 Eastern Standard Time. And that's fun. So I expect a lot of people to have some really interesting comments and questions. I want to hear what you're thinking about. I want to be able to really serve you and be a resource, for you to tap into. Okay? So now after you've studied this material and have that, and that's a complete package, you'll have a complete body of knowledge. There aren't any gaping holes or anything in that. You have a complete package of information, of material there. Then to have a half an hour reading with me. And basically a half an hour reading with me, your job in a half an hour is to get as much out of me as you possibly can. So you come fully loaded. You come fully loaded with your interests, your questions. And if you don't have anything at all, which is great, I think that's really funny. People will tell me, well, I had all these questions and all these things I wanted to ask you, and now that I'm on the phone with you, it's all just gone. I have no idea, or none of it's important. That's fantastic too, because then we get to go into the undiscovered country. We get to go somewhere new. And just the idea of being able to connect with each one of you a little bit, being able to share with you from the pages of my life, be able to share with you some of the insights along the way. And I think it's just great to meet people. This is about people. It's about sharing. So that's why I wanted to include that.
And isn't it interesting and wonderful that Anna Mitchell-Hedges didn't know what her role and mission was when she was introduced to this beautiful crystal skull, and look how it opened the doors, and look at where we are now. So thank you for that special offer. It is available on the special offer button on this page. If you're interested, check it out. It's great. Thank you again for that. We have some questions coming in. Well, Anna Mitchell-Hedges transitioned. Who is in charge of the crystal skull now? Do you know where it is?
Yes. My energy with the crystal skull was complete. It was all done with the event that you can watch online. It's on YouTube. It's called the Celestial Beacon. That was that custom geometry that I built in 1996 with the skull. After that time, I went on my way, and Anna moved from Kitchener and became involved with a man named Bill Hahnemann, I think is his last name. And I didn't really know anything about him. And his energy is very different. Okay. And, but for whatever reason, Anna just went and was involved with him until she passed away. And now he's the caretaker of the skull. And, the skull, let's see, how to be kind. Now, I'm trying to be kind. The skull is not a carnival toy. And so many of these skulls are...
he doesn't bring it out to be viewed. Is he possessive of it?
But it's the way that it's done. See, now you can rent the skull for your ceremony. It's like renting a clown to come to your child's birthday party or something, and you can.
That's what it has become.
But Anna told me that all of these things may happen. She did in one of our luncheon conversations, and she told me not to worry because the skull will always take care of itself. And
Yes.
From the very beginning, Anna always told me that the skull liked me very, very much. And one of the things that I forgot to mention is that Anna was so psychic that I would feel intuitively that I should call her from anywhere in the United States and just tell her that I've been feeling her, and perhaps it would be time for me to come up. And when I would call her, she would know it was me before, it was before caller ID and all that stuff on her phones. And she would just say something to me, barely even say good morning or good afternoon. She would say, the skull will see you Thursday at 9:30. And sometimes I'd be in California. And I would be flying or driving. Literally, if the skull said 9:30 Thursday, I was there. And I can't tell you how many times I cleaned up in a rest stop somewhere, just to get there on time to be with her. But she was amazing. She was an amazing psychic, and you would never know it because she never really talked to too many people about it at all. So anyway, I thought everybody would like to know that.
Such an amazing story, and thank you for sharing all of that information. And we're so glad that you had that experience with that skull, because you really are connected to it. And as you say, you're directly transmitting the energy from that skull to all of us and to all of the people that you pass on this earth. So that is beautiful in itself, yes. All right, so we have time for a couple of questions before we let you go this evening. We have Roslyn in New South Wales, Australia, who asks, is it possible for skulls to settle ghosts who have been massacred in tribal conflict?
Is it possible for skulls to, what was the phrase?
To settle ghosts who have been massacred in tribal conflict.
Oh, settle mean like calm and help them find peace. The skull, and I hope you can feel this from me, because this is a broadcast, not just of my voice, but of the experience of the skull. The skull carries with it a weighty sense of peace, of strength, of well-being, and that permeates multiple dimensions, or what you could call planes of existence. So spirits of beings that are distressed in any way find comfort from the skull, in the presence of the skull. Just like many thousands of people that have been with the crystal skull, when they've had the experience, particularly to just relax and experience it, find themselves more deeply peaceful than they've known in years or decades. So I have to say yes. Yes, the presence of the skull would be able to help liberate any of the different tumult, or suffering in this plane of existence as well as in other planes of existence. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Rosalind, for that. And let's do 2 more quick questions on our chat line, and then we'll take one caller on the phone. Let's see. We have a seer down in Mexico has a question about, maybe you can answer this intuitively, he says. He says he has been inspired to transport a big skull, an elongated shard, both of quartz crystal, to France for solstice. These 2 pieces have been exposed to the telluric energies of the Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico, among others, for a pretty long time. and their final destination would be the Neolithic site of Karnak, more stones but bigger, in French Britain. So he has simply no idea of why, but could it be related to the ley line, or for what purpose?
Sure. Karnak in France is another real specific set of monolithic stones set up to, you could say, hub in to the ley lines that go around the Earth. And if you're sensitive enough to be able to hear and feel the presence of the quartz, or of the crystals, then, as strange as it may sound, it's kind of like your responsibility to listen to them. It's like me, when Anna says the skull will see you Thursday at 9, if the crystals say France, if you have the ability to get there, then definitely do that. Definitely do that. And that isn't the end point of the journey. That's just the beginning point. Once you get there and bring those pieces there, then their connection into the Karnak grid system is the beginning of another whole journey for you as a person. What that is, no one knows.
Yes.
But that makes
yet to be revealed.
That's right. That's right. Stay tuned.
Well, I commend Seer for listening to the call of the crystals and taking that journey to France. Beautiful, all the way from Mexico. All right, here's another quick question. Do you know if the skull is from a specific world or star system? Any knowledge of this?
Excuse me. It's my experience being merged with the skull that excuse me one second. I've been talking all day. That this crystal skull was made by the ancient Sumerian Anunnaki. And there are two main clans, the clan of Enlil and the clan of Enki. And the clan of Enki goes on through time and becomes the Egyptian mystery schools, the House of the Blue Lotus. It becomes the Academy of the Blue Star from Socrates in ancient Greece. And it carries on different mystical traditions. And so it was fashioned in outer space. And the Anunnaki, who come from another planet, say that the planet that they're on wasn't their home, and that they see the Pleiades, of course, Sirius A and Sirius B particularly, being their home solar systems. So that's pretty much the origin. And I mean, that's just kind of scratching the surface of another huge question and answer thing. But I hope that gives you a good series of breadcrumbs to move back into some type of awareness of what I'm talking about.
Well, yes, isn't it fascinating that in the Pleiades themselves there is a star or a planet called Maya. And we learn that when you go to the Mayan ruins and you look at the hieroglyphs on the side, there looks like a being that is in a space helmet. And we've learned that the Mayans did have a breakaway civilization, as it's been called. So have you ever wondered if the Mayans brought back this crystal skull to put in their temples, or that perhaps it arrived on its own volition, I guess, if you could call it that?
Oh, I think it was brought back purposely by some of the Maya and their beings, the extraterrestrials that visited. Um, I took my wife Yolanda to Mexico to go see the ruins. She had never seen that before. And while we were
Which
there,
part?
we got this. We went
Yucatan?
Yeah, we just went to the Yucatan. We went to about 6 different sites. Most of them were off the beaten path. So there were some very cool stuff going on. And we had this great Mayan cab driver. And his great-great-grandfather, you know, they all passed down the stories. And his great-great-grandfather explained to them, to his grandfather, or his great-grandfather, to his grandfather, to his father, to him, that when Cortez came in 1520, that the majority of the Mayan elders left. They just left. And they didn't, and he said that they didn't leave in ships that went up into the sky. They walked through a portal.
Oh, wow.
And so I found, and a couple other people, we found the stargates back there. They're at sites that most people don't go to. And
what do they look like?
They look like arches.
Arches.
They look like arches. And on either side of the arch, there's stairs going up, and on the other side, the stairs, of course, look like they're going down. And these arches will be in the middle of nowhere. There's no other temples, no other structures, and it's because they're at the intersection of 2 major ley lines. And so they pick up the telluric currents, the harmonics, and then once you know how to chant, how to do the ritual, you could say, which is the toning, chanting, you literally activate the stargate, and the combinations of tones sets the directional heading of the stargate, and that's part of the technology.
Well, that is part 2 of our healing conversation with you next time, because that is a fascinating topic. And I know that many would love to hear that. Yeah, and when we go around to the sites and learn about chanting, chanting really does connect us into the higher dimensions. Do you have a better way of explaining that? The purpose and the meaning of chanting?
That's pretty much it. Chanting is the rocket fuel.
Okay. And I know that you are equipped with chanting, and you do that in all of your teachings, and so that's a whole nother conversation. So I thank you for your time tonight, but I do want to ask a quick question here from Huntington Beach. Stephanie asks, I'm wondering if sea glass or created lab jewels are effective for anything. I have a piece of light pink sea glass, and I'm hoping to learn if these are useful.
It's not that they're not useful. They are what they are. And sea glass, aside from being beautiful because of how it is, has the energy of the ocean in it. And you can practice your psychometry by holding the sea glass and being able to hear the sound of the ocean, being able to feel the movement of the water just by holding it. And so therefore, its purpose can be to help calm you, to help still you, to help empty you of yourself, just as the ocean does as you just step out into it and let it hold you. So there.
Thank you. Practicing the psychometry, listening to our crystals, that's a very important step. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to San Francisco. We have a cell phone caller ending in the numbers 8119. Hello, you're unmuted. Do you have a question or a comment for Christopher?
Oh, hello. I'm so happy you took my call, and after listening to how profound the information is, it's amazing. I hope that my question helps others. I've always felt drawn to crystals, but recently I've acquired a quartz crystal, per my healer, spiritual, she's amazing, the help she provides. And I started using it recently, but I'm a novice. And I've had other crystals, 2 large ones, just because I've drawn them, but I never knew what to do with them. Is there a way that I can familiarize myself? I've been using it for healing work and placed in front of me when I meditate every morning, which I've recently started doing because I now have some time to do this. Is there a way to bond with this or purify for someone like me that's just beginning? Thank you so much. Bless you both.
Thank you, Stephanie. The best thing to do when you get a crystal, to make friends with it, to develop personal rapport with the crystal, is to begin to clear it, and then to charge it. And as you do that, you're spending time with the crystal. And you being in the San Francisco area, the most effective way to really clear a crystal almost instantaneously is just by holding it carefully in your hands and putting it into the ocean's water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and through diffusion, it just empties it. It's just click, boom, and you can feel it. The crystal actually feels lighter. And wow. You have to be careful because crystals get really slippery in the salty ocean water, okay? So just hold them, let it go click, and you'll feel it. And sometimes it can be a jolt. And it doesn't mean that the crystals had bad mojo in them or anything like that. It's just that crystals pick up static cling from their environment. And so you have to depolarize them. You clear them. And then you can charge the crystal. And the more time you spend with the crystal, the more you'll begin to entrain with the vibration of the crystal, which means that you'll be able to listen and hear the crystal. You'll notice impressions directly from the crystal, if not actual sounds coming from the crystal, and feelings like do this, don't do this, put me here, oh no, don't put me down now. And crystals become very, very personal. You know, I here in my office now, I probably have about 30 pounds of quartz crystals just all around me right now. And they all want to be exactly where they want to be. Mm-hmm. I don't put them where I want them to be. I try to, but no, they end up rearranging themselves. And they tell me where they want to go. Because we are caretakers for these amazing interdimensional beings.
Quick question regarding cleaning it in the ocean or purifying it in the ocean. I've had a couple of profound healings with some amazing people recently. I'm so grateful for this time that I have. I'm blessed. Will that erase any of that?
No.
Okay.
What gets cleaned out, it's like defragging your computer.
Thank you.
Scan disking your computer. It just scrubs stuff out of your computer that doesn't need to be there and is extraneous.
It is not mine. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both. Bless you both for your profound service and work. I am so grateful. Thank you very much.
Great to have you on the call. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And what was your name?
Vivica, you spoke with me recently. Actually, I was running in and out errands, and I picked up the phone call that Max the Skull was on, and Max said, thank you for welcoming me or including me in your schedule. I ran back to the car to listen to his clearings. I mean, so I'm grateful I tuned in at the right time. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and you said Hildeka?
Vivica.
Vivica. Oh, Vivica.
Yeah, Vivica.
Hi, Vivica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
I'm
holding my crystal
Thank
in my
you.
heart. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. What a splendid time we had with you tonight, Christopher. We will definitely bring you back to talk about stargates and sacred sites and all of the information on this planet. And what I love the most is that these crystals are really helping us access a higher dimensional grid, a crystalline grid, a galactic grid, a universal grid that is beyond the 3D grid of this everyday life. And that is inspiring. And when you open up to this, the answers that come, as you said, quartz crystal amplifies you. So this is beautiful. As we say goodbye this evening, Christopher, are there any last comments or messages you'd love to share?
As we consider that crystals are people too, as you become interested in quartz and want to explore what they're all about, let your crystal, or let the crystals that you come upon when you shop for crystals pick you. Don't pick them. Let them pick you. And then you'll have just an amazing relationship that will be just beautiful and simple and very natural. And that's it.
That's it. Crystals are people too. And let the crystal pick you, much like when we go to the Humane Society and pick our next animal. Often that animal picks us, and this is no different. And we know what that's like.
That's absolutely right. That's exactly the way it is. I was thinking of that, actually. That's very good.
Beautiful. Christopher Timms, thank you so much for being here on Healing Conversations. Thank you, too, for listening and sharing in this space today. We leave you now with music from the universe, literally sacred geometry of music, as musical notes were assigned to mathematical equations. The result is this beautiful music, available at acoustichealth.com.